Hi folks, welcome to Give Me the Remote. This is episode 24 on the 11th of December, nearly Christmas.
2018.
2018. I never get the intro right, or do I?
And who are you?
I'm Sheridan. Just give me some time. And I'm joined by my very corrective friend, John.
Friend, huh?
I've downgraded you.
Downgraded your friend. Hello, folks. Glad to have you listening. We've done another change to the audio setup in the pod, but I think we're doing something better. And
it's very high tech in here. We should really have a YouTube video going.
I did take a picture to maybe use as the cover photo, but yeah.
Probably should have cleaned the living room before you did that.
Anywho, shall we start reviewing stuff?
We should.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should start with Netflix's new series. Everything's a Netflix new series these days.
Well, that we're talking about anyway.
Dogs.
Yep.
Which is a story or a show about dogs, but it's also about humans.
It's mostly about humans, really.
So it's 6 episodes, all discrete storyline.
I feel that they just got a bunch of documentaries that were already being made anyway and slapped them together with a dog theme.
Well, being the conscientious podcaster that I am, I researched.
Yes.
Unlike you.
And what in fact was the situation?
You just bring your natural charm to the reviews. I bring actual facts. So one of the executive producers is a woman named Amy Berg, who was nominated for an Academy Award for a documentary called Deliver Us from Evil, which people might have seen on Netflix, which was about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, which was very, very good, much darker than dogs. So she sort of brought a real-life experienced documentary filmmaker. And the other EP was a guy named Glenn Zipper, who I wish I was this guy, because he started life as a prosecutor, a lawyer, which I was, and now he's descended into cool movie-making things, and I just work in a museum. But anyway, we won't talk about like how cool Glenn Zipper's life is compared to mine. But he
wishes he had this podcast, though.
I think he's got enough things on his plate. So he is actively involved in philanthropy with animal rights organisations, and when he was a prosecutor, prosecuted several animal abuse cases, so he had a real interest in it. But the way they sourced the stories was pretty much old school kind of investigative, kind of internet researching, just finding stories that already existed out there. So for me, and I think you'll probably agree, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but for me, the standout episode is an episode where there's a guy who has just moved from Damascus in Syria as a refugee to Berlin.
Yeah, I was going to say moved is a little understating the refugee experience.
Fled.
Yeah. Fled for his life.
And he leaves his husky Zeus living back in Damascus with his friend, and he tries to rescue him. And the way that they found out about this story was Zipper had seen a story about 800 abandoned dogs in Syria, which of course is what's happening there, because whenever anyone wants to flee, they have to leave their dog behind. And so he got his researchers to investigate this, and they found this story of this group of guys, because it's not just about the dog owner, it's about his friend who is left with the dog and all their other friends trying to get this dog over the border.
And the German rescue group as well.
Yes,
who do seem to care more about the dogs than the humans in Syria.
But that's not true, because there's a German rescue group that rescues dogs from Syria, but they're reuniting them with the owners who have moved to other countries. So it's of benefit to the refugees who are trying to re-establish their lives.
True, but my suspicion is that the group cares a lot more about the dogs than it does the refugees.
I can't speak for the group.
Okay.
But what I loved about this show was it actually gave you quite a good insight as to what it would be like to be both a refugee and a person that's still living in a war-torn country, because you see them going about their day-to-day lives, trying to hide this dog that Syrian police are kind of quite interested in. He's a very attractive dog and likeable.
Well, it's a big, powerful dog, and the thing is that the police say, oh, he'd be a good police dog. And they're in a situation where if you see something you like, you pretty much just take it.
And it's also, I mean, these people would have gone through so much, but they really hold on to this dog as like a real precious being that they're trying to rescue and get out. And it's almost as though they've probably dealt with so much grief, but losing this dog was just unacceptable to them.
There was also a really nice bit where they, and I don't think it's too spoiler because it's mid-episode and it's one of a series, but they get to the border and the first set of border guards they deal with are like, you can't take that dog through this checkpoint, go away. And they were smart enough to know that the shift would change in a few hours and they might get told something different by a new shift. And obviously the border captain, who was new on, understood exactly what was going on and was loved dogs and was keen to get this dog the hell out of Syria. So, and that was an interesting view of the dynamic of those sorts of situations you don't normally think about. You just think what's said at the border is absolute, but it's really not. It's very fluid. I mean, so the stories of humanity that are told with a fringe of dogs throughout this, it's in some ways it's just a set of really good documentaries that happen to have some dogs. And obviously, famously in this podcast, you hear sounds of dogs snuffling around in the background and occasionally joining in. So we're keen on dogs, and it is always fun watching something with dogs in because the dogs just get really excited with watching it as well. So if you've got dogs that like watching TV with you, then that's an added bonus, really.
You thought there could be more dogs, though.
I thought the focus could be more on the dogs. I felt I learned more about the personalities of the humans that were worrying about the dogs than I did necessarily about the dogs. I
felt like Zeus, the husky, was the dog that had the most personality or character from the whole series. Although, what's the dog called? So in the first episode, there's a medical dog, Rory, his name is, who's trained to recognise the seizures of a girl with epilepsy. He's quite a character as well. Well, he's just actually, maybe he's not a character, but I mean, that is a highly trained dog.
Yeah, I found that story so heartbreaking, more the way the family had stuffed up the story they were telling their daughters, so that suddenly when they're being introduced to the trained assistance dog, and the other daughter who thought she was getting a dog puppy too had to be told, you can never pat this dog or be friends with this dog. Or
maybe not. You can't give it a treat, or you can't. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not your dog, and anything you do to try and make this dog like you is putting your sister at risk. And this little girl just broke down because she'd been just told the family's getting a puppy. Yay. But again, that was it was a heartbreaking human story, and it was fascinating to watch. But that was way more a human story than it was a dog story.
Yeah, it did really show the dynamics of living in a family where one child's got very high needs, and I guess just the dynamics that exist in that situation.
Yeah. So it's a great piece of documentary making. Yes, there is a dog focus. I feel like it's the fourth time I've said it. I feel, based on the premise, I could have done with a bit more dog and a bit less person. But in general, I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. These are some really good stories. I
liked how they were from all over the world too.
Yeah, although, we didn't like the subtitles enormously. So it is subtitle heavy, just something to be aware of. Not every story.
Not every story, no.
The one they finished with, just think the amazing statistic that, what was it, there are more dogs in New York City than Cleveland, than there are humans in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And life for New York City dogs was a really interesting view, and the somewhat nutty, I would say, rescue group running out of New York who funneled dogs from Texas shelters into New York families.
That's when you really get an idea of the size of America compared to Australia, because there is a rescue organisation that's specifically set up because there's such demand for rescue dogs in New York that they're getting them from all of these other cities in the US, whereas I don't think there's anyone doing that in Sydney or Melbourne. I think there's enough dogs.
I mean, Australian Working Dog Rescue International does drag dogs out of rural pounds all over the place and finds them other homes.
Okay.
Not
on this scale.
No, not on this scale.
There's this one scene where they put them all in this sort of minivan and they're all
30,
stacked up.
36 dogs stacked up in a van down the highway. They say, "Oh, I'm really worried about a toilet break." I'm like, "How do you do a toilet break for 36 dogs? You'd be there for hours." Getting them in, getting them out, walking around. Come on, do you want to have a wee? No, I don't want to have a wee.
They were fighting with each other.
Yeah. It's just horrific to think of trying to transport that many dogs over that distance. And they didn't even really show it, did they? They didn't even try and show us what the wee breaks looked like.
No.
I don't know. Do you just try and back the van up to a dog park and just let them all out? Collect them at the end.
Probably wouldn't know what ones were yours.
Yeah.
All right. So what are you going to give it?
I will give it, I think, 3.5 stars.
I'm going to give it 4 stars. I thought it was really well made. It's actually really well filmed.
Oh yeah, production values are sky high.
Yeah. Given that it's a documentary, quite cinematographic. That word. And just great storytelling. So I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Okay, nice one. So what's next?
Well, I guess I better let you review Doctor Who. I don't know, is there a new one out? Like, what, are they still making it? Have they got a dog as Doctor Who now? What's the deal?
Wow, you're really bagging out the sisterhood there. So,
actually, that's not true. I'm bagging out Doctor Who. And for that, I expect we might get our first email.
So, Doctor Who, Season 11. Season 11 of the recent Doctor Who. It is the 55th year of Doctor Who, which is one of the... Well,
hang on, it's the 55th year?
Yeah.
But TV hasn't been around that long.
Oh, they were making Doctor Who right at the start.
They've been making Doctor Who since the beginning of TV?
Yeah.
Wow. What more is there to say?
So, for those who don't know, Doctor Who is a science fiction story about a time-travelling alien, and as a device to deal with the fact that actors don't live as long as this show does, they have a plot device whereby the species of alien the Doctor is goes through a regeneration periodically, where they end up looking like a different person, almost as if they're being played by a different actor. And in the previous...
So it's the same Doctor?
Yes.
Oh, I thought they were different Doctors.
No.
Right. Okay.
But when they immediately go through a regeneration, they lose a lot of their memory and they become quite a different person, although they have a lot of the same characteristics. And in the previous seasons of Doctor Who, they had set up that regeneration does not necessarily be gender specific, and a number of other Time Lords, which is the species of alien, and Time Lord is an odd name for a species of alien, I will grant you. A number of other Time Lords have regenerated as women, because they were all men at the start. But
so there's other Time Lords other than Doctor Who?
Correct.
Right.
They're from the planet Gallifrey.
Right.
And so this one, they've brought the Doctor has regenerated as a woman played by Jodie Whittaker. And it's a bit complicated because there are times where they don't want to have her being weak because she's a woman, and then there are times they don't want her to be completely unfeminine, so there are jokes about not being able to drive things.
Oh, God, really? Ironic, though?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh. That's rough. Maybe
yeah. Although, Doctor has, throughout his history, struggled with driving the TARDIS, his time machine. In canon, that's because the TARDIS was actually designed to be piloted by 6 Time Lords, and he's just on his own because he stole it. They stole it now, I guess. It's all getting more complicated, isn't it? And so the show, they've got a whole new writing team, and apparently one of the things they did was say they had to have an equal number of male and female directors and writers, and brought in a whole bunch of deliberately brought in ethnic minority writers.
So this is BBC.
It's BBC production, yeah.
I think the BBC is doing this quite a bit now.
Yeah, well,
which is awesome. I mean, that's the only way they're going to correct the problem.
They're honestly getting more interesting stories out of it.
Yeah.
Like in this season, and people are screaming, "Oh my God, it's social justice warriors gone mad!" They did a season where the Doctor went back in time and met Rosa Parks. They did not a season, an episode. They did an episode about the partition of India. Now that is a piece of drama that has been woefully underrepresented in anyone's shows. And I'm not entirely sure Doctor Who, it's certainly not the be-all and end-all of representation of the partition of India. And remember, this is an event where millions of people died and hundreds of millions of people had to move hundreds of miles to get the Hindus on one side of the line and the Muslims on the other. So they definitely were picking up stories of interest to ethnicities that are not white Anglo-Saxons males. Groupings. So that's good. The team of companions was actually really interesting. They had an old man, Graham, the G-Train, as the fans have been calling him, who's quite feisty with the Doctor, and there's some interesting stuff there with basically a retired bus driver catapulted to alien worlds, deciding at times he's not going to do what he's told. In particular when he gets the chance to potentially kill the alien being that murdered his wife. So there's conflict within the team. At the same time, the pseudoscience in Doctor Who's always been a bit of a problem, and they've turned the pseudoscience up to 11. As a long-term fan, there are no recurring villains, there are no recurring plot lines, there's nothing except the Doctor and the TARDIS.
So that's always been the case, not just this season.
No, normally you do get a lot of recurring stuff. And but this is what they're calling a soft reboot. So they brought in new writers, no recurring villains, alien races, characters.
Oh, so they're kind of starting again.
I think that the plan is in future seasons and episodes to go back to the canon. And bring more of that back. Because when you've got such a rich 55-year history of characters and villains and stories, you're mad not to. But for this season, they've kept it entirely fresh because they want new fans to be able to approach the material.
So maybe I could have watched it.
I did try and tell you that.
I don't... The thing... I mean, I am a bit of a nerd. I love Star Wars.
I was surprised you didn't
Lord
like
of the
Doctor
Rings. I get quite addicted to TV shows. Maybe it's just because I never watched Doctor Who as a young person, so I don't have that kind of, nostalgic attachment to it that you get with a show like that. But I don't, and the fact that you said it has been going since the beginning of TV, I knew it was old, but I knew there was black and white episodes, but I didn't know it was that old. What's the appeal?
For a start, the BBC has very often hired the very best writers available. In recent times, Stephen Moffat's been writing it. He's done a number of excellent shows before. Douglas Adams, in the past, was one of the lead writers on the show. So they have always employed some of the very best writers in the English language to write the scripts. And that's allowed them to get away with cardboard monsters and horrible green screen special effects. Because if the story's there, then people can be, literally sitting in plastic chairs and shouting at each other, and you can pretend you're in a spaceship.
And why haven't they never made a movie?
Oh, they made several movies.
Oh, they've just not been very successful.
I think 3 or 4. They've been successful enough.
So if I wanted to go back and start from the beginning, I'd be here for a while, wouldn't I?
Well, in general, people starting again normally start with the Christopher Eccleston episodes from season 1 of what we'd now call 1 to 11, which started in the late 90s, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So that would probably be where you start, and you can skip a lot of the rubbish episodes as well, so you don't need to watch it all. But so why not try watching? We'll go back and try maybe to get you watching this season's episodes, as it's the soft reboot meant to let new fans approach it. Having said that, some of the pseudoscience-y bits are a bit rubbish, but it's very well shot and it's much more diverse. I'll give it 3 stars.
3? 3?
3.
I'm not going to go and start watching a show that's 3 stars. How would you rate Doctor Who overall as a whole thing?
Oh, well, hang on. If we're rating it overall, there are decades where it's terrible. So you can just write those off. There are the episodes that were so terrifying the BBC destroyed them because the official government censor said they
couldn't have. Could they? Don't they have an archiving responsibility?
Oh, this is very controversial. That there are these lost episodes of Doctor Who. The BBC at one point was saving money, so it taped over a bunch of old stuff. They keep finding them in archives in other countries, like the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation here in Australia with the ABC.
See, this, folks, is why you need properly funded archives.
Indeed. But there was also some of the raunchier stuff in the late 70s. Official censors demanded be destroyed because they viewed they should never be watched by anyone. This is a show with a long and storied history of controversy and then periods where it's just desperately underfunded and terrible. So anything with Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor, I would strongly recommend avoiding. And probably even if you go back in time to the black and white stuff, it's a very hard. It's like going back and watching black and white movies like All Quiet on the Western Front.
Because the narrative structure and the way it's presented is so much in its infancy that
it's very hard to enjoy watching it, and everything's paced so slowly. Yeah. You
even go back to like early episodes of MASH, there was early episodes of MASH that were in black and white, weren't they?
I'm not aware of that.
But anyway, very early days of that kind of TV, and you're like, this is a bit rubbish.
Yeah, pacing's gotten a lot better. I mean, the music video revolution changed the way television and movies were made as well, and that people realised you could do storytelling at a much, much faster rate. And sound production. There's so many things that are improved. I would highly recommend, if you're wanting to get into Doctor Who, don't start in the black and white era. Just let that stuff live in the past.
So would it be the world's longest running TV show? Because the only reason I mentioned MASH is because I always think of MASH as being the longest running TV show.
I believe it holds that record, but possibly in the English language might be the qualifier. I can't speak for the rest of the world. There might be some Mexican telenovela that's been chuntering away for the whole time, but it's certainly definitely one of the longest running by a long stretch. But it has had long interregnums. It's had decades off the air.
Okay, because MASH was the continuous. I think that's why.
I think the Doctor Who, even like the continuous run would be much longer than MASH's.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, this is a new season. If you're Who curious, then it might be well worth trying to jump in here.
I'm just a little afraid if I start watching it that I'm going to become one of those freaky people that like loses their mind when, I don't know, there's a black doctor.
I think having accepted a female doctor, the fans are going to be.
I think the internet has still got a lot of ways to go. I think it can a trans doctor.
Oh, they're kind of there right now, aren't they?
Oh no.
Well, the doctor went from being a man, and now the doctor's a woman. We still don't know whether we should call him, her, or they.
Well, actually, maybe it's more revolutionary than I thought.
And, no one's inspected the doctor, so it could be it's actually a man looking and dressing like a woman.
You're overcomplicating things now.
So, that's Doctor Who.
So you're giving this season 3 stars?
As a Who fan, I'm giving this season 3 stars.
What would you give it if you were just not like a person like me?
This is kind of why I wanted you to watch it, but I'd be really interested to know what someone cult starting on this. It's a bit like someone who starts watching Star Wars with Episode 1. Weirdly enough, what a freak that would be.
Well, I think that's how people watch them now.
It's how a lot of people have watched it. Yeah, we should probably try and get one of them into this show. But it's problematic when things have long lives and long established canon. So anyway, as someone who appreciates the canon and knows about it, I miss this being a whole season of new canon. I miss the old stuff. There are storylines that desperately need resolving in Doctor Who that have not been addressed now in about 3 seasons, and that's a long time to wait to find out what's happening with those storylines.
Well, sounds like you'll be waiting longer.
I think they are planning to start going back to that stuff in the next one. I mean, there's a whole universe of time and space of old friends of the Doctor who will be very excited to see a perky blonde female in place of the generally crusty old man that they have always assumed the Doctor to be.
Benedict Cumberbatch or whatever his name is.
Benedict Cumberbatch?
What sort of name does that guy have?
But no, Benedict has never been the Doctor. He has been mooted as the Doctor at times.
Oh, so who was the last Doctor then?
That was Peter Capaldi.
Who was the one before that?
Matt Smith.
Oh, I swear. No, Benedict Cumberbatch has been a Doctor.
No, never.
No?
Matt Smith, David Tennant. So,
David Tennant is who I'm thinking of.
Yeah. David Tennant is very much the high watermark of the modern Doctor Who.
That's the hottest Doctor. That's what I've got to look forward to, is it?
I think Christopher Eccleston was probably hotter.
Right.
And I mean, Tom Baker, when he was younger, if you're going back to the stuff from the 70s, had a certain animal magnetism to him.
And it was the 70s, so he could, really let loose.
Yeah, although the special effects are crushingly bad in that period. Anyway, I think we've talked long enough on Doctor Who.
Yeah. Okay, what's next?
Donald Glover, Weirdo.
So Netflix, well, actually, it's not a Netflix special. It's actually a Comedy Central special that's now airing on Netflix.
It's 2012, and it was kind of presented by Netflix.
2011.
No, my research said 2012, but let's early 20s.
You did research.
Early 2010s, shall we say?
Yes. And that actually, I think, well, while we're talking about the date, I think this special suffers from being a little bit pre-thing. So it's pre-Donald Glover being really famous.
Yeah.
Pre-Childish Gambino, which is his hip-hop rap alter ego.
Mm-hmm.
And pre-Me Too.
Some of the jokes are a little misogynist.
At the moment, female comics there's a revolution occurring in stand-up comedy. So it's pre all of that. And when you compare it to looking at, Hannah Gadsby and even Amy Schumer and, what's her name? The Tiger Mother, Amy Wong, is it?
Amy Wong.
Amy Wong.
Mm-hmm.
Compare this to all of those. It's a little staid.
Yeah, it's weirdly dated considering it's only 8 years. And I would actually say the Martin and Short that we reviewed some time ago, even though they're much older comics, possibly because they're more experienced, better comics, but even though they're much older and much more dated comedy, was a much more polished performance. This is 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Donald Glover was a much more unpolished performer then than he is now.
Definitely.
Although we should also note, I think in a previous podcast we said he was Danny Glover's son and he is unrelated to Danny Glover.
He is not related to Danny Glover at all. Although, no, his father's name is Donald Glover as well, but he was a postman. I don't think Donald Glover has ever really made much of a name for himself as a stand-up comic. His big break was working for 30 Rock as a writer.
Yeah, which is a huge break for a 23-year-old.
Huge break for a 23-year-old. And he's not, quite well known for his acting. Especially, got his first major...
He's a fiendishly talented dude.
He is a fiendishly
talented dude. To be able to write, direct,
dude.
Act, sing at the level he does, to be literally at the top of the world game in all of those fields.
I think he suffers a little, though, from,
not concentrating?
Well, that, and also you kind of like, oh, come on, dude. Like, what's his name, that guy from Pineapple Express,
Seth Rogen?
No, the other one. The hot one.
James Franco?
James Franco.
James Franco is not a patch on Donald Glover's arsehole.
You think Donald Glover's more of an arsehole than James
Franco?
No,
I think Donald Glover is more talented than James Franco in every possible regard.
James Franco is a much bigger star at the peak of his star than what Donald Glover is.
I do not think that's correct at all.
He's an Academy Award winner.
What's Franco won?
He won an Academy Award, didn't he, for Best Actor for that 27 Hours where he got his arm chopped off but under the rock in the hiking trip.
I didn't know he'd won an Oscar for that.
He was at least nominated. He was big time when that was happening. He then tried to screw a 17-year-old and just all kind of went downhill for him. And
I just feel James Franco's famous for being James Franco and very little else myself.
But I think...
Donald Glover had some real achievement behind him.
I think Donald Glover is more likeable. But I think that they suffer from a little bit of the same thing where you're like, do I have to see this guy again doing something amazing? Like, you get a little bit of tall poppy syndrome.
Yep. Okay. Now let's take us back to this.
But going back to this comedy, I mean, there's some interesting moments in there. And he is a really good storyteller. He's got a maturity to his storytelling.
It's probably better when he's telling stories than he's telling gags.
Yes, definitely. He's a better storyteller, and that's probably because he's a writer, I think. I mean, and he's got a very vivid imagination, and he's really good at making you picture what he's telling. So he has this gag about, well, I won't go into it, but performance. He talks about, like, in his dreams, and Lady Gaga's playing a giant tampon bass, and you just when he's telling that, you're seeing every single.
He does
bit
good
of
impressions as well.
Yeah,
he does very credible impressions, which is.
Well, he's an actor. See, and
he does mention that at times, and sometimes it's hard to almost tell when he's storytelling and when he's just playing something as well.
And he seems to have had an interesting upbringing, which would have provided a lot of, it provides a lot of material for him. He lived his parents had a lot of foster kids, and so there's a lot of stories and things which he tells. And I mean, he does. I think you can tell the age, and because it's not that long ago. But when he touches on racial issues, I think if that was those stories he was telling were done today, he'd be going harder on that.
I think he'd do a very different set today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at This Is America, the film clip, it's
very pretty
political.
tough on that stuff. Yeah.
But, because he tells the story about when he, someone saw him in Community in a superhero outfit and started a Twitter hashtag called Donald Glover for Spider-Man, and it took off quite big, and the internet went crazy, in a similar vein that they did when there was a woman Doctor Who, and said, no, this can never happen. And it was never even on the cards, but Stan Lee actually came out and said that he would totally approve of it happening, and people just went off, and he recounts what that was like to be living through. And that was quite interesting. And also, I guess that was kind of, probably the earlier days of Twitter, and social media had really gotten to a mass scale at that point. I know we've had it for a lot longer, but not everyone was using it straight away.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's still a minority pursuit. It's mostly journalists trolling for reaction as much as anything on Twitter. But,
So, yeah, I mean, there are interesting bits in this. And for 1 hour, I think you'll come off with a few laughs, a few insights.
As long as you remember that Danny Glover is not his dad, so when he makes jokes about his dad masturbating, it's not Danny Glover. Very important. Because I was labouring under that misapprehension at that moment. I was like, whoa. I feel for his dad. I'd be a little peeved if, the whole world knew what I got up to in the den. How many stars?
I'm going to give it 3 stars.
Yeah, okay.
I think in 2011 I probably would have given it 4 stars, but I'm going to give it 3 stars today.
Yeah, I think it's a solid 3 star. Wow, I've just been sitting on 3 all night.
Everyone's been sitting on 3. It's a 3 kind of week.
Yeah, it's been an okay.
Actually, I gave Dogs 4 stars, didn't I?
Yeah, there you go. You just didn't remember it.
I didn't even remember what I did 2 minutes ago.
I think I did 3.5. So anyway, let's move right on. If you've enjoyed this podcast and there's anything you'd like us to review, please do send us an email at gmtrpodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can leave messages on our Libsyn hosting webpage or Facebook or Twitter. We should probably do Instagram at some point. Oh, and of course the YouTube channel. Yeah, we love you YouTube guys. You're amazing.
I think we're really well suited for Instagram. It's more of a visual medium.
Yeah, no, I'm only joking. That's a joke about
it's terrible, very deadpan delivery.
Terrible social media ideas. Yeah. At least I'm not flogging Snapchat filters. No, we should definitely be on Snapchat.
Our little heads and microphone over the top of you.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for listening this far, and we will be back next week. We've been watching a whole bunch of shows that we're very close to the end to, so we'll should have a fresh new slate of content come up soon.
Yeah. Thanks, folks.